Before Donald Trump, the Trump era of presidential elections, the conventional wisdom was that presidential campaigns do not get serious until after Labor Day. But for Trump, he will emerge from this Labor Day weekend into a September of court dates and debate. Today, we are expecting the next major step in the federal election interference case against him. Special counsel Jack Smith's team and Trump's attorneys are expected to propose a schedule for future court proceedings. It comes just days after a federal grand jury returned a superseding indictment that charges Trump with the same 4 counts he faced in the original indictment returned last August, but whittled down in light of the right-wing majority Supreme Court's ruling in favor of Trump that presidents have immunity for official acts. We could also hear from Judge Tanya Chutkan in the matter. Both sides are scheduled to appear before Judge Chutkan for a hearing next week, the first court hearing in that case since the Supreme Court ruling. That hearing is next Thursday, September 5th, just 5 days before Donald Trump will face off in a debate with Vice President Harris on September 10th. The following week, September 16th, New York Judge Juan Marchand is set to rule on Trump's motion to have the verdict in the hush money election interference case thrown out because of the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity. If he declines to do so, Trump will be sentenced in that case on September 18th, 7 weeks before Election Day, November 5th. In addition to ruling on Trump's immunity motion in New York, Judge Marchand has yet to rule on Trump's request to postpone his sentencing until after the election. So Trump's lawyers are throwing another Hail Mary on that. Late Thursday, his lawyers filed to move the matter to federal court in yet another delay tactic, citing the Supreme Court's ruling in July. A federal judge has rejected that effort for now, but advised it could be refiled with either opposing parties' written consent or court's leave. It is not the first time Trump's lawyers have tried to get the hush money case moved to federal court. His lawyers invoked presidential immunity in a failed bid last July, setting the stage for his trial and conviction on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. Last year, federal judge Alvin Hallerstein ruled that the evidence presented involved something personal to the president, quote, a cover-up of an embarrassing event. Hush money paid to an adult film star is not related to a president's official acts. It does not reflect in any way the color of the president's official duties. I cannot believe a judge had to actually say that and that I had to read it to you. But here is where we are. Joining me now is Andrew Weissmann, MSNBC legal analyst and former federal prosecutor, and Maya Wiley, president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and former assistant U.S. attorney. That was a lot, friends. I'm going to start with you, Andrew, because it's a lot to parse through.
Totally.
But I want to start with whether or not Donald Trump has any chance of taking that 34-count felony conviction and somehow moving it to federal court in order to throw it out based on what the Supreme Court has ruled.
So the direct answer is it is highly unlikely that he is going to be able to get it to federal court. As you noted, he has made that motion and lost it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the only intervening fact is this Supreme Court decision that should not be enough to have Judge Hellerstein revisit his ruling. Remember, though, that whether it's in state court or it's in federal court, that changes who the judge is. But whether the Supreme Court gets to ultimately weigh in on the 34 counts to say were they tainted by immunized testimony is something that the Supreme Court of the United States gets to weigh in on eventually. That's what I'm sort of mostly worried about.
Yes.
Because even if it goes through the state court process, eventually Donald Trump
get it back.
gets to exactly.
And it's clear to me, and I think it's now clear to most of our fair viewers, that John Roberts is going to protect Trump. And that if at the moment he gets it back, he's going to find a way to get him out of going to jail, right? That's what's happening.
Well, let's just say it's not a very positive Supreme Court if we care about the Constitution and if we care about the rule of law. and that is our reality. I mean,
Yeah.
look, going back to what Andrew's so rightly said, I think we also have to remember that part of what we're seeing here is every effort to ensure the delay.
Right.
Because it is consequential if the American public that has to make a decision about how to cast a ballot is seeing Donald Trump repeatedly in a courtroom. Because that visual alone is unheard of in our history. And so whether it is now or later, what they're just trying to make sure is it's later, so that they're actually in a position where voters are not being reminded constantly that not only is he a convicted felon, but that it may make a difference what happens to him after an election.
Yeah, and by the way, let's put the calendar back up on that point. This is the calendar again. So you see the first date in this calendar once it's up there? September 5th, this hearing in the federal election interference case. The day after that, North Carolina starts early voting. So people will be voting between that hearing and the debate with Vice President Harris. Before the debate even happens, one state will already be early voting, Maya. This is going to be a thing that's happening regardless of the outcome on the 6th.
And it's a state in play. Right.
And it's a state very much in
play. There's a lot of money being spent by the Trump campaign in North Carolina right now.
Yeah.
And so, again, they're really looking at this, I think, no personal knowledge, but they're looking at this and they're seeing the chessboard and they want to make sure other people aren't looking at it too.
Well, the way that I think the rest of us are looking at it, though, is a rule of law question. Here, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson does not do a lot of interviews. She's not done very many interviews. She's now done one. And this is her talking about that Supreme Court immunity ruling. Here she is.
You were concerned about broad immunity.
I was concerned about a system that appeared to provide immunity for one individual under one set of circumstances, when we have a criminal justice system that had ordinarily treated everyone the same.
And I just, to that point, want to quote from the filing by Donald Trump's legal team asking the federal court to take over that hush money case, because it goes to this. Accordingly, they call him still President Trump. Respectfully request that the court accept this second removal notice, confirm that Justice Marchand may not sentence President Trump during litigation over this second removal notice. They're leaning into his former role and saying, essentially, you can't touch him while this election is happening.
Look, what we're really talking about, take the lens out, is the American legal system has failed. This is one where, unlike other legal systems around the globe that have managed to hold political leaders to account, we have not.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has figured out a way to play the system, and he's been aided and abetted by the Supreme Court, by Judge Cannon, to slow things down so that the actual sort of accountability is whether guilty or not guilty, is that day of reckoning is put off. Now in New York, it's about putting off the day of reckoning of sentencing, because Judge Marchand, to his credit, at least got that case to trial. But this is really, sort of a grade. I'm a professor, so I give grades. This is sort of an F for how we fare compared to so many other sort of so-called Western democracies that do actually know how to hold people to account.
And the thing that makes it even worse, to be honest, is that it feels in some ways like the conservative members of the Supreme Court are doing it also in their own self-interest, because I think everyone understands that Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas will retire immediately upon the inauguration of another Republican president. If Trump comes in, they go out, and allowing the Heritage Foundation, the same group that's put all six of them on the bench, to put two 30 or 40-year-old versions of them on the bench. We kind of know who they are. There's some of the judges who have made some of the most insane rulings to the far right, and we know that is what's going to happen. So you have just John Roberts, who's sort of portrayed as this sort of moderate, normal person, but it's clear that he's down with that. He wants that.
So, look, we to Andrew's point and to your point, Joy, the system, the judicial system has failed, and I do say judicial. I mean, the civil side actually worked did work when it came to Donald Trump,
Absolutely.
right? It really is the criminal, but it's also the Supreme Court by not holding to our constitutional, not just norms, but precedents.
Yeah.
I mean, they butchered the precedents in their opinion on immunity, and they butchered them over and over and over again whenever it comes to the guardrails.
Section 3 of the 14th Amendment apparently does not exist.
Exactly.
They wrote that on accident.
Exactly. So, but I think the point here, coming back to the importance of the calendar that you pointed to, and how a democracy fixes the problem of a failure of a democratic system like the court system is elections.
Yeah.
And so the importance of not losing the court date, and I do mean this in the Judge Merchan case, to remind folks of what's at stake, because Project 2025, just as you just did a segment on, the difference between who is in office and how they utilize a power that the Supreme Court says they have to be protected from the accountability of the judicial system. The way that they can utilize the Department of Justice is actually on the ballot.
100%.
So I think it's actually critically important that the date hold, because I think it's important that Americans be reminded of what questions they need to answer for themselves when they show up at the polls.
That's right, because how Donald Trump would use that power versus how Kamala Harris would use it, very different. And he has made it clear he will use it to harm people he thinks are his enemies.